We're here to make a new type of news.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Making news just for you. It's April 9th here in Seoul. I'm Shin and you're watching News Generation. Joining me in the studio is Choi Ji-hee.
Good morning.
Good morning. And Im Sang-yeon.
Happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday. Now, both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. As usual, let's start with our news feed, which covers different hashtags and news items that have been trending on social media over the past 24 hours. A Samulnori team appeared at English Premier League team Tottenham Hotspur's home stadium on Monday. Samulnori is a genre of Korean traditional percussion music. Samul refers to the four traditional instruments used, changgul, gong, and drums. The performance seemed to be an event prepared by the club to celebrate Sonny's 400 games at Tottenham since 2015. Son also scored a total of 160 goals for the club. A video of Kim Hye-bom reading a handwritten letter to her late father, Kim Tae-seok, who was killed in the sinking of the Cheonan warship, has gotten over 10 million views. The video was recorded in light of the 9th West Sea Guard Day held at the Navy's 2nd Fleet Command in Pyeongtaek, Gyeonggi-do Province last month. There, Kim Hye-bom, in a teary voice, tells her late father how she recently got into college and thought about him at her high school graduation. She also noted how she feels as if her father is sending her a message through the blossoming flowers in spring. Back in March 26th of 2010, a North Korean submersible torpedoed a South Korean warship, Cheonan, killing 46 out of 104 people on board. This included Kim Tae-seok, who was aged 37 at the time. And here in Korea, a popular phrase that reflects most people's coffee preferences is 얼주가. It refers to drinking iced Americano even though the weather is freezing cold out. While iced Americano is usually the most popular steady seller among Korean customers, local franchises found that foreign tourists looked for coffee drinks including milk such as cappuccinos, caramel macchiatos, or cafe mochas. One franchise also analyzed how 9 out of 10 foreign customers who ordered Americanos also asked for milk on the side. And as we're seeing more international tourists visit South Korea, more coffee franchises are trying to analyze their palates. Many have found that foreign tourists order sweeter drinks and desserts, which is why some franchises, like Holly's, have decided to customize their menus. Now, here in the studio, what do you guys usually order when you go to different coffee branches abroad? And what types of menus would you like to recommend to foreigners who visit Korean cafes?
You got me because I drank ice cold Americano on my way to Arirang this morning.
Really?
Okay. So when I tend to visit other countries, I try to follow what Romans do. I recently visited Thailand and I drank the watermelon juice, which is a really popular drink in the country.
땡목반.
땡모반.
Yeah, 땡모반. Yeah, the name is 땡모반. It's really nice. You guys should try it. And when I visit countries like Italy, in Europe, I do drink hot cappuccinos or espressos, and they actually wakens you up even quicker than the iced Americano that we drink here in Korea.
I see.
As for the inbound tourists who are visiting Korea, I would like to recommend them to try iced Americano at least when they're here in the country, because for me it seems that these days iced Americano has become the iconic drink in Korea, and I think iced Americano is like the soul beverage for many Koreans these days.
So you are the type to try out the most iconic beverage when you go to the country, whether that be 땡모반 in Thailand.
Yes.
Now, what about you, Ji-hee?
Well, I was in Thailand last year as well. I went to Phuket and I had a really good latte. Although Thailand isn't that famous for latte, it was a really good one. But when I go for coffees here in Korea, I usually also drink iced Americano. But then I'm not an 얼주가 because I tend to get really cold drink when it's freezing out, and I can't drink cold drinks because I literally feel like I may freeze.
Yeah.
And so I usually drink hot coffees in winter times. However, if I were to recommend foreigners what to drink when they come to Korea, I would say I'd recommend iced Americano as well as some of those drip coffees. They have hand drip coffees, not in the franchises, but try visiting those cafes where they actually roast the coffee beans themselves because they taste different. And as for iced Americano, not so much because of the taste, taste, but because like Sang-hyuk said, it's iconic here
It's
in Korea.
iconic.
Everybody drinks it. So
Exactly.
to try the culture out, I would recommend that.
And if I may add on, I would like for you guys to go to different regions, not only just in Seoul, but if you go to Jeju-do, there's actually customized menus based on their local products. For instance, Jeju is really known for their matcha or their suk, which is green work. And if you try them out, they add it all to their coffee and beverages, so you can really try the local taste there and really widen your experience. And hopefully you'll have the chance soon. Now, in the meantime, we're going to switch gears to our main discussion topic of the day. Tomorrow is the 22nd general election, where we will decide on who will make up the National Assembly. It's an important date in the political calendar, but our generation has been considered quite nonchalant towards politics. And we're going to start our discussion here. Is this true? Is our generation somewhat nonchalant with the 22nd general election? And how have officials been trying to boost young people's political participation, especially when it comes to the upcoming elections?
Well, we can take a look at the numbers to figure out if they are quite nonchalant when it comes to voting, because in South Korea, first of all, individuals who are 18 years old or older are eligible to vote, and this age requirement used to be 19, but a law was revised in 2019 allowing 18-year-olds to vote as well. And according to the Ministry of the Interior and Safety, as you see on the screen, approximately 12 million eligible voters are in their 20s and 30s, which accounts for about 29% of the total eligible voters. Now, compared to other age groups, however, the turnout of young voters, or the MZers, has been consistently low throughout the past elections. In the last 21st general elections, for example, the turnout for 25 to 29-year-olds was 56.7%. It was similar for those aged between 30 to 34 and 35 to 39 as well, and so on. And these numbers are significantly lower than the overall turnout of 66%.
I mean, the overall turnout is only a little bit more than 6 out of 10, but to see 3 out of 10 of all the eligible voters being from our generation, yet only half of them going to practice their election rights, seems to be a troublesome issue. And Sang-hyuk, would you like to add on how officials have been trying to boost their political rates here in Korea then?
Yeah, sure. So as we have just seen on the screen, you can see that many youth are showing less interest when it comes to voting compared to that of the older generation. So the Korean National Election Commission, which is in charge of the election campaign and the whole process, is putting extra efforts to draw more votes and interest from the MZ generation. So the commission released a promotion video featuring Nugent's Minji as the advertisement model to attract more youth to vote. And it's also making a parody of famous TV shows like I Am Solo or SNL Korea to encourage more people in their 20s and 30s to cast a ballot.
I see. So they're better using popular stars at the moment, or shows, media content, to better captivate our attention. And it's also politicians too. Politicians have also been rolling up their sleeves to better catch the attention of millennial and Gen Z voters. So Chi, why don't you walk us through some of their latest efforts, especially ahead of the 22nd general elections?
Sure. So although MZers have a low voter turnout compared to the overall voter turnout, they hold an important position in Korean politics as the so-called casting vote that can determine the outcome of the overall general election. So it's really crucial to win their vote. So in recent years, candidates have been using short forms and releases, the short video clips that are popular among the younger generation to attract the MZers. So this morning, I actually saw one video clip on my social media account, and it was a young candidate. He had a video made for himself. He was walking down the street and he just tripped over something, I don't know what, and he accidentally voted on his own name on the ballot. And then he would keep walking, and then he, I don't know, pressed some button, and this song that was singing his name started coming out. It was quite funny, and I thought it was pretty fresh. Yeah, so they're using these sort of methods to really grab the attention of the MZers and to encourage them to vote.
I love it. I love that last-minute campaigning can be fun like that. And it's quite fascinating to see that politicians are better captivating our attention by using shorts and reels, which really understands our short amount of attention span when it comes to media content these days. Would you like to add on to this question?
Okay, so first, I pay respect to all the political candidates for coming coming up with such creative ideas. So the candidates are also coming up with election policies that focus on financial support and welfare in order to draw more votes from the younger generation. So if we think about the current economic recession and rising real estate prices, offering housing benefits to youth would be the most ideal option for these political candidates. So many candidates insist that they will approve constructing public housings and providing such real estates to college graduates and the newlywed couples. And these houses are also nearby the office and school districts, which would be beneficial for many youth. And another trending policy is opting for establishing dormitories for college students by renovating closed down schools or abandoned public facilities. And these policies were in fact the most frequently used policies if you look at the modern election history of Korea, because there's nothing better than housing incentives and national scholarships to entice young people to vote.
I think you mentioned a great point there. I think in order for us to boost youth political participation, we really need to focus on better pledges and policies that can better tackle what we're going through, whether it be our struggles or any solutions we'd like to see. But another way is boosting the age, the political participation age, by seeing more young politicians, because we want to see representatives from our generation. And Chi, which is exactly why I'd like to ask, how many millennial and Gen Z candidates are running this time around?
Right, so as per the National Election Commission, as you see on the screen, we have 253 proportional candidates registered by 38 political parties, but only 33 candidates were millennials and Gen Zs, which is approximately 13% of the total. And in particular, there were just 11 candidates who were in their 20s. Now, compared to other nations, there's a significant dearth of young politicians here in Korea. And also, several people believe that it's quite challenging for young candidates to represent different youth segments and important parts of society because of this dearth in number. And most of the current politicians and lawyers are relatively older. So really, the lack of young politicians is one of Korea's major issues to be solved in the near future.
I think that's a really great point, because even though we're seeing a lot of policy pledges targeting youth, it's as important to see youth speak on behalf of youth. And as you mentioned, we are seeing a dearth of young politicians. So, Sang-Hyuk, can you give us a comparison as to the relatively low amount of young politicians in Korea compared to other parts of the world?
Right, so it's a bit sad that Korea is falling short compared to other countries when it comes to young politicians, because already in the West, we can see some examples of young candidates running for an election or becoming the leader of a party or a group of congressmen. And we all know that France has one of the youngest lineups of politicians in their assembly. Gabriel Attal became the Prime Minister of France at the age of 34, which I believe is the youngest person to become a Prime Minister in the French history. And not to mention, of course, we have President Macron, who took office in the age of 39. Now, because Western countries teach politics and education related to state affairs at a very young age, I think this is leading many young people in those countries to run for the candidates of elections. And some say that the cultural difference between the West and East is also contributing to the low number of election candidates in Korea, because as you know, countries in East Asia tend to have more strict and hierarchy-based social structure, and this could be one factor that discourages the young politicians to advance their career further because they are left out usually in the major political sector.
Right, and seeing less young politicians might affect our political participation rates in our generation. And to better find out more about what our generation's political participation rate is like compared to other countries, we asked our viewers to tell what it's like in their respective countries as well. So if you take a look at the screen, you can find out what 3 of them had to share with us. Leon said, I think youth in Singapore generally have a lower interest in politics compared to other countries. Singapore youth might be more interested in social issues and expressing themselves through online activism or volunteering. Dadu said the youth in the Philippines are very much interested in politics, especially the latest this presidential election. And now politicians are being monitored through social media. Jack Thompson says here in the UK, I do think the youth vote and registration rate is rising. And boosting political participation and awareness is integral. But how can we do that? Let's ask a political science expert. Stay tuned for a live interview. We're now going to turn to Professor James C. Schaff from Keimyung University. Welcome, Professor.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thanks.
All right, let me ask you the first question. Why do you think Korea has a low political participation rate, especially among the younger generation, compared to other countries? And specifically, why is our generation not voting as much as compared to other generations?
Okay, well, actually, compared to other industrialized OECD members, the Korean parliamentary election turnout is about average at about 66%, and the presidential election turnout was second highest at 77%, which isn't that bad, actually. So in terms of younger voters, across countries, the young typically vote at a much lower level than the older generations, about 16% below. And that's because voting is new to them, and it's a new habit that they have to get in the hang of. But vote, as you mentioned, turnout by Koreans was around, you mentioned, I think, 56%. I have 61% for those in their 20s in the last assembly election. And this is higher than in most OECD nations, and in fact is much higher than the 40% recorded by Korea's middle-aged Generation X 20 years ago. So when they were in their 20s, they didn't vote very much at all. But there's one factor, though, as you mentioned as well, that gives MZ voters a pivotal role in determining the outcome of tomorrow's election, which is that MZ voters do not have clear political leanings, which makes them critical swing voters. So in contrast, Korea's oldest generation came of age during conditions of scarcity and tends to lean conservative, and middle-aged Koreans matured during a prosperous era facilitating progressive politics. But the MZ generation has not had to struggle for freedom or for survival and lacks strong ideological inclinations. So most of the undecided in this election are MZ generation voters. But these voters are not tuned out or disillusioned. In fact, they're more committed to other issues like human rights, justice, and the environment.
I see. Well, other than the voters, though, compared to other countries, we also have a smaller number of young politicians. Now, why do you think this is the case?
Yeah, that's true. The average age of assemblymen today is 56 years old. And back in the 1980s, it was in the 40s. But we should keep in mind that Korean society is a lot older now, too. So the average age of Koreans today is 46. In the 80s, it was 23. So it's natural that an older society is going to have older politicians. But still, the Korean parties want to attract these young voters. And one way, of course, is to increase the number of MZ politicians. And the problem, though, is that there are vested interests that dominate both major parties. And the candidate nomination process, for instance, is not open to new voices as it should be. And primary elections are not held in every electoral district, for instance, as they should be.
Okay, that's very interesting perspective, Professor. Then how can we boost political awareness and participation from our generation, from your idea?
Okay, well, I think both parties need to bring in new voices, and so they need to install open and fair and transparent candidate nomination processes. And they should also take specific measures that target the youth, like abolishing age requirements for party membership or introducing youth politician quotas. Some other countries do that. Or establishing youth wings to the party to nurture new talent. That's common in Europe. and setting aside campaign funds for youth candidates as well. And also, I think it would be helpful to reform these campaign rules to allow for more debates that focus on policy, other than the kind of sound trucks that we see with the dancing, cheering squads. I don't think that attracts many young voters.
And lastly, Professor, tomorrow is the 22nd general election, and though compared to other OECD countries, we might have a higher turnout rate when it comes to casting ballots, I do think that there's still a majority of Gen Z or millennials who don't really realize how important their vote could be. Could you tell them what would happen if we remain nonchalant when it comes to practicing our election rights?
Yeah, so why should the young voters care? Well, there are really important reasons to care. I mean, young MZ voters have serious economic concerns, like soaring housing costs, higher youth unemployment rates. And these things make it a lot harder to start a family. Both major parties, as was mentioned earlier they're courting the youth votes with specific policy proposals, like the special bank accounts, the youth housing, the discounts on university tuition and transportation, and even basic income for children. But young voters need to judge the credibility of these campaign promises. A party committed to free market principles, for instance, might have a much harder time justifying these interventionist measures, more so than a party that's committed to promoting greater equality. So I would say, look at the overall principles of each party and see if they align with those pledges.
Yeah, and we have one more day. Yeah, so enough research would be necessary during this time.
Sure.
Thank you so much, Professor. It was a pleasure talking to you today.
Oh, it's great to be on the show. Thanks a lot.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
And ending off, I'd like to ask our two panelists, will you two be voting tomorrow? And how important is it to practice our right to vote?
Well, for sure, I'll be voting tomorrow because I didn't vote during the early voting period. And it's very important, in fact, for us to cast our votes. Like the professor said, for us, we have a lot of economic concerns. And I believe it's not just important to exercise our right to vote, but also cast an informed vote as well. So make sure that you know the policies and do some research before you actually cast that ballot.
What about you, Sang-Yeop?
Well, I already did prior voting to take a day off tomorrow. Okay. So many youth and even some older generations repeatedly say during these election times that your vote will not really change much about everything. But I do want to say that actually your one precious vote can make a big change to the election results. And the voting is like the fundamental responsibility and also an advantage of a democratic citizen. So I would like to ask all our viewers out there, especially the youth, for tomorrow to be serious about voting. And why don't you guys all go to the ballot site and review the policies and the histories of each candidate and make your one precious vote worthy.
Exactly. And ending off on a positive note, though in the prior part of our discussion, we just looked at the figures and thought that our youth political participation rate could be relatively low, I was quite happy to find out that compared to other OECD countries, our turnout is relatively high. But hopefully it gets even higher by seeing more young politicians represent us or seeing more voters be very, very attentive towards what type of policies are there for youth. And hopefully one vote, as you mentioned, Sang-Yeop, it all counts. So one vote counts. So make sure tomorrow you use the time to really cast your ballot and practice your right. Now, in the meantime, we'll be here every day from 9:30 to 10 a.m. Korea time, bringing you more topics young people are talking about. Special thanks to Choi Ji-hee.
Thank you, and go vote.
Go vote. And Im Sang-Yeop.
Thank you for having me.
All right. And thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you on Thursday. We are News Generation.